Hello, Phillida.
Hello, Creelan. Thank you for being here, and thank you that this interview can happen.
Thank you for being here, Phillida. The question we have today is, what do you think are the most important teachings from the Cauldron?
You see, that's a mighty question, isn't it? Well, I believe that maybe you could even answer that question better than I can, because you're teaching them now. You're one of the teachers that we have. Teachings from the Cauldron. Well, you see, for me, the greatest teaching of all came from Jesus the Christ. And he said, you know, there you are looking at that small fault in your brother. And if you could take time, look into your own heart, how many times have you done the very same thing? He's just a total reminder, rehearter to you of something either you're not looking at in your own life, something you have looked at but not so fond of it, so we place it on the shoulders of another. And it's very easy, I have found, pardon me, it's very easy to put that blame, put that guilt, put that whatever on the shoulders of a member of the family. And this member of the family, it would seem like they take on the cross or the shadow, because the cross is the shadow of the rest of the family who will not own that. I see the same similarity with regard to Hitler. I spent 10 years in Germany researching Hitler, and I think the work I have done about Hitler's childhood is such, to me, such a teaching. When I'm not totally clear within myself, when I'm not in my authentic place in me, and when I am looking around for victims to place my shadow on, that's the beginning of war. It starts the war here, pardon me, but unfortunately it continues on the outer. So I sometimes will say to you, when you were students, I'd say, what's your feeling about so-and-so? What's your feeling about that and that and that and that? And you would clearly see that we were projecting our own unhealed stuff onto something, someone, some event, even some religion with me, some philosophy, some psychology out there, because it's not comfortable to carry it in me. Now, I've said to you all so many times, if there's incongruency within that core group of teachers, you are bringing that into the wider community. Then the wider community spreads into the city, and it spreads out into the whole of Scotland, because one or two people sitting together are finding fault in each other, or placing their shadow on the shoulders of another. So for me, Creelan, and you've heard me for years saying this to you, we need to look into our own house first. I need to clean out these cupboards first before I go to my friend and say, gosh, you know, her cupboards are not clean. I wouldn't see that anyway. But for me, this is the most important. And as I say, Jesus the Christ spoke about this, and he told it in stories. You know, there you are, seeing the big beam in your brother's eye, but you haven't seen this huge mountain of stuff in your own. So yes, for me, that would be the main teaching of the Cauldron. All the time, it's an internal inquiry. We're continuously inquiring from inside, but as you know, Creelan, there are two ways of inquiry. There is the religious way of self-confession, which might be known as inquiry. But that's the way of guilt. Oh, look what I've done. These are my sins. Oh, isn't this terrible? How can I continue like this? Oh, I've hurt that poor person. Oh, I haven't said that and I should have. Oh, what a terrible person. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. So rather than be raised up with excitement as I am, to see, there's another part of me I didn't know. There's a part of me I'm trying to hide. Isn't that interesting? What a discovery. What a joy of knowledge about this amazing woman here. And I know that's the way you teach. You teach people to look into their own hearts with compassion. Because if that compassion is not for me first, I'm going to be putting something else out there. I'll be putting pity, sympathy into the world. So this self-compassion where I watch with myself in my grief, in my pain, in my misery, in my shadow self. Because we need that sacred holding we didn't get from parents. We need that sacred space where I can fully declare who I am, shadows everything, and know that this will not be a cause of other people moving away from me, not liking me. I didn't know she was that. I didn't know she was that. So to be able to own it, I own my arrogance. I say, oh, there you are again, sweetheart, knowing it all. Isn't that wonderful? How old are you? And I'll sit with myself. And I'll say, oh, yeah, there you are in Bay School, and your mother's a teacher, and you're afraid of not knowing, so you put your hand up and you get the wrong answer. So that part, the child part of trying to appease the mother, trying to get in there to get the right answers, but I just hadn't the intelligence at that time. How can a child be supposed to be intelligent at school when they are emotionally in turmoil? Pardon me. And the same I say to bereaved people. Don't ask them to start looking for forms and signing forms. Don't ask them to look at cards or the bank statements. For goodness, somebody do that for them, because the emotional heart has to have space, and it can't quickly go into cognition because it's too caught up with emotion. And we have to honor that emotion and let it be, and give the person time and energy to work through the grief first, so that the emotion can flow into the heart for feeling. And as you know, you're tired listening to me saying it, if we stay with just emotion in the first three energy centers in the body, we're going to be reacting from ego, where the shadow is, bless its heart. When we move these emotions into the heart for feeling, we can then express with love. Because love is the only emotion apart from fear, both. So, yes, going back to the school, afraid then to get the wrong answer. So it's very, very difficult sometimes for people to own their arrogance. But once we own it and see where it comes from, it is totally, it is so helpless. Arrogance is the most helpless emotion, because I find it's an emotion because there's a reaction, isn't there, in arrogance. And it's quite lovely when we can apply compassion to ourselves, when we can apply compassion to our fears. Oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to go into that relationship. The others were so terrible. So you stay with that child in fear. Name your fears to me. And you name the fears to this amazing wise woman listening. And you listen with a compassion that you never had when you were a child. And I know that you all have developed that now, that self-compassion. And with self-compassion, we are never a victim, you see. Only when we have pity. Poor me, isn't this awful? Oh, God help me. Sure, I'm worse than anybody. Oh, it's awful what happened to me, you know. That's keeping myself helpless and hopeless as a victim. But when I can move into compassion for myself, I see myself as an amazing divine being that I am. That I am. And that's very important in Celtic teachings, the teachings of the Cauldron. We don't ask the question, who are you? As I said to you before, that's quite evident. I'm Phillida. I've beautiful energy. She sings. She gives talks. She da la 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 la. That's the personality. That's the who. That's what I've grown into. Now, the what of me. What are you? Now, there's a question. What are you? And beyond this personality, I am divinity wrapped up in human flesh and blood of a woman. So when you ask, what are you? That takes you very, very deep. The who is surface as far as I'm concerned. And we sometimes, we fall in love with personalities. We love the personality. But once the personality does something that I don't like, we don't like the personality. Therefore, we don't like the person. But when we go to the what are you, I just love this question. Because the what of me is the same as the what of you. And the what of you is the same as the what that is in the tree, and the what that is in the flower, and the oceans, and the sky. Because we all hold within us that sacred, implicit memory of love. That's not emotional, that is not conditional. That love that is literally neutral, but brings harmony and brings equilibrium. Because that's what it does. And that's what's holding up the world. The balance of everything. And at the moment we'll say, oh, terrible what's happening in the world. It's balancing. It's coming into harmony, just like me. You see, if I can project, which I do very often, this being into the world, looking at the earth, looking at the world and the cosmos in general as a mini-me. So when I'm in turmoil and when I'm in conflict within myself, that's the energy I'm bringing to the outer. So the outer then mirrors what's happening in me. But we call it all these strange names. We call it disasters. We call some deaths tragic. These are name tags the ego will give to something spiritual that it doesn't understand. So when we look only through the eyes of ego, through the eyes of cognition, through the eyes of association, we'll call that tragic, we'll call that lovely, we'll call that beautiful, we'll call that horrible. But we're all the time translating what is into an ego mind of some kind. These terrible tsunamis, yes, they're very sad. But if I lose one jot of my presence with me, because of that, I'm allowing that, no matter how awful it is, to take over my life. Now, when I say all that, I'm talking about extremism. My brother died in December. I had said goodbye to him for 3 years. So I didn't have that awful grief of maybe a sudden death, or that I'd been so closely living beside him that I would miss him terribly. I missed him for the first 3 months of his diagnosis because I worked with my grief. I worked as if he was leaving from that time on. So I was able to be with my family. It takes nothing out of me once I've done my work. We're all amazing once we've done our work. We have energy then to be with family, to be with friends. And at any time, as you would know, if I was tired, I'd say, no, I need rest now, because I care for this being first. Compassion for me first. And then it goes to the family, and then it goes to the community. But I'm getting my compassion before you get it, and you know that. And everybody that works with me knows that. So what am I saying? The projections, whatever is going on inside of me, will be projected on the outside. I am a very contented woman. I don't have very many needs. If I have my black chocolate, that's a great need met for me. I love colourful clothes. We have great charity shops. I love being with my grandchildren. They're here living in the same town. There's so much I have. There's you, dear Creolan, who, you know, you literally sat and almost wrote my books for me. The poetry's the same, the teachings of the Cauldron. You are always there, ready to say, I can do it. And I trust you because I know if you can't do it, you'll say, no, Phillida, this is not a good time for me. Or I'm off on holidays, or something. And therefore I can trust you as an authentic person because your yes is yes and your no is no. And I'm a bit like that myself. Yes, I would love that. No, you know, sweetheart, I wouldn't like that at all, thank you. I'll never use that. Please give it to somebody that might use it. So the games, you know, the relationships games that used to go on with friends. You know, I bought you something lovely today. Oh, did you? Oh, what is it? I have 4 of them at home, you know. What do you do? Well, you're gentle and say, oh, yeah, you know that I love that. I absolutely couldn't have got a better thing. That's what I love, and I have 3 of them. So what'll we do? There's a way of doing it to be totally authentic and not to be so outspokenly, what we say, against. Back to the Cauldron. The shadows. The shadows, the blessed shadows.
Could I just clarify
Yes.
something? I think that because I think culturally, when we don't like somebody, we really believe, oh, it's them, you know, and getting this real understanding that if I'm not liking somebody, that it has more something to do with me than them. And until I'm in compassion for whatever that is in me, then I would have compassion for the person outside of me instead of being in this not liking. It's that...
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You've learned that one well. Pardon me. Excuse me. What is it that I don't... Why is it there's some people I really like and some people I really don't like? It's called resonance. I've got resonance with both. I have resonance with the person I don't like because they're so like me that I don't want to look at. They're outer reminders of what I haven't done in my own life. And I don't like to see them. I have resonance with the other because that's my golden shadow as well. That's the part of me that I love. That's the part of me that delights me altogether. So I think it's the other person, but I'm actually feeling my own golden shadow when that person is around. I feel good because you're here. You know, the idea of I love you with all my heart. And when you're not here, I miss you so much. No, you miss the part of you that you had literally banked in the other person. I miss that part of me that comes out when you're around. I can't seem to bring it out for myself, but you're there and you bring it out for me. So it's not really so much about that person themselves, it's what they help me to bring out in me. So if I can find that in me, which I have, I'm not going to be needing some kind of an overt model of me so that I feel okay. Does that?
Yes.
Yeah, you teach that very well yourself in your groups, Creolan.
The golden shadow, yes.
Yeah, the
yes,
golden
yes.
shadow and the dark shadow. So, was there, I don't know what else.
Well, the video was going to be around the most important aspect of the Cauldron, and it was on shadow.
Yeah.
And there is you know, there's a culture of cognicizing emotions. I think we call it that, isn't it?
Yes.
Cognicizing
Yes.
emotion. And when people are trying to open into their own heart, open into the divine presence within themselves, a lot of people don't go through the emotional stuff. And what is the problem with that? Talk more about that.
So, am I hearing spiritual bypassing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, you see, I'm the queen of that. Pardon me, I'll rephrase. I was the queen of that. Having been a nun, as I say to people, I started at the wrong end for my healing. I should have started with the lower energy centers where the ego rests. But instead, I went to the Godhead. Literally, Godhead. And I didn't know that I was an emotional wreck. I didn't have any emotion of any kind. Nothing. Bland. Going to give my life to God. But it didn't. How could it work? That can't work. How can you be a holy person if there's part of you that you've never looked at? So I had to leave the convent. And as I say many times, if it hadn't been for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross helping me to externalize, I'll never forget it, what was it, 1983 in Northern Ireland. And she said to me, you're too nice. Of course, I was a yoga teacher and I was sitting properly and singing beautifully and what have you. Lovely, because I was out of it. I wasn't there. I was associating all the time. And when I started my cathartic work on the mattress with Elizabeth, the howls that came out of me and the rage that came out of me, well, that went on for 5 years. And I was able to really deal with so much stuff then to take the top off. But then I needed to go deeper and deeper, because not on psychology alone does women live. We need an awful lot more than psychology in order to heal, and you psychotherapists have found that, and that's why you're bringing in psychospirituality, and it's the Celtic, the ancient, ancestral philosophy that we bring in, as well as good humanistic psychology. But when you, when we talk about the shadow for me is amazing grace. If there was no such thing as the shadow, we didn't have to incarnate. We incarnated to work with the shadow, to pick up the pieces of the shadow left behind from our last dying process. So whatever that we left behind would have been parts of the shadowed self, the unfinished healing. So every time we pick it up in order to run with it. So I'm always amazed, and like the other evening, pardon me, at our Zoom, pardon me, we were talking, what was the last Zoom with the subject? Yeah,
Education.
Education
Yeah.
and empathy. And to hear the patriarchal model on empathy, I think I had my mouth open listening. And this lovely person saying, well, I've written, 14 books on this, and I'm an educational psychologist, and I'm going to do this, and I've got a HMB and an RCL and an ABCD, and then all the charts of the day to distract, and taking time to go through the stuff, and wait till we see what we have here. And I'm thinking, I am bored. My heart is not here. I've had this stuff before. I don't want that. I want soul. I want to find the soulfulness in things, in education, in industry, in the workplace, in the home. Where is the soul in this stuff? And then, of course, one of our own students, Anna Lucretia, comes in with, I teach the blind. This is how we do it. This is the imagination. This is the soul I bring. I'm thinking, oh, thank God we have you here. And then I came in strongly with, okay, let's look at what empathy is. Let's see what it really is, because most of the time we're giving pity because we haven't looked into our own lives with compassion first. I mean, have you ever heard somebody, if somebody comes to you for therapy and they sit down and you say, I don't know what you say, something like, well, how can I be with you today, or what's going on with you? And they say to you, Creel, would you mind if I just for a moment kind of dissect myself and put the sacred is there, and that's a given, and that's there all the time in me, and I'm totally aware of that. That's the sacred me. Now, may I just work with my emotional, my ego self, please? And then will you remind me later that they're both the same? Because I sometimes forget. But right now, I'd like you to know that I acknowledge that I'm a sacred being. And this is the ego I'm bringing to work with. And I know working with you, people come away and say, wow, that was divine. Because you bring in the divine. You don't leave it sitting on the table for the person. You bring it in, and that's what creates the healing.
And
That's
the holding.
And the holding. The holding. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, my understanding, when we're working, especially with shadow, we're working with the what we call dark, and we're working with rage, without the presence of this soulful holding, because that rage needs to be accepted in this place of love. Yes. So it needs the presence to heal. So if it's just an expression of rage, like people, there's a culture of people going to rage rooms now where they get to smash up TVs, but there's no holding of that. There's no presence around it. It's just violence.
Yes.
Whereas when we're expressing in a held, there's something about, oh, it's so hard to put words on it, but it's the heart. It's like what's cold is being invited, being allowed. It's not even being invited, it just needs to be expressed in order to come back to itself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, that's the holding place of soul. Soul holds everything without judgment. And this is why we bring in the shadow. Pardon me. You know, the nuns I've worked with, and we've talked about the shadow, and that's known as the sinful self. The self that moves away from God. And then, of course, with my own theology, I ask them, how can anything move away from God if God sees all and is in all? Sister, please mind your catechism before you say things like that. So you have to pull people up in what they think they know, because it's not truth. It's not truth. Sin takes you away from God. The shadow removes us from our own authenticity. And when we're fully in the shadow and act only from shadow self, we have abandoned the divine in us. It will never abandon us. You know, got to write the whole catechism all over again. But we abandon that part of ourselves when we're self-blaming, when we're self-judging, when we're criticizing other people, when, oh, they shouldn't have done that, and what an awful, awful government. Yes, yes, I voted the government in, right? Oh, it's terrible, they should never have been allowed. He did that, she did that, all out there. I hear it every day. And they'll say to me, Philida, you're naive, you don't know what's going on in the world. I'll say, okay, if I sit here of an evening and I'm just feeling this amazing joy in my heart, and I might sing a little goof to myself, and I'm counting the amazing blessings and the great choices I've made in my life. Tell me, is that worse than looking at the news and saying, with the bastards, why did they do that again? Look at them, there's a war everywhere, and I'm going to bed with a heart palpitating. Do you think that's helping people? No, it's not. It's not helping anybody, and it certainly will cause a heart attack in me if I keep living like that. living only in the shadowed world, then that's a different thing to taking the shadow and looking at it and loving it into a totally new existence.
A question,
Yeah.
just because what you've described about being this nun, that
Yeah.
would be so purer than pure.
Indeed.
So how did you go from this high up dissociation to working with your rage? How I just wonder what must that have been like, because that was the no-go in
Yes.
your culture.
Oh, yes.
And yet you've done that work.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if that's...
You see, I believe everything is a grace. It's a grace for my own divinity that led, grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears released. I go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I was there on the mattress shouting and screaming. Why? Because the allowance was there. The invitation was there to do it. I was ready to, the woman who had been on the mattress before me had been screaming her, and I could hear my mother scream that she never screamed. And I automatically, when Elizabeth did this to me, I just went, and it just came all out. So I was ready to pop, as I say. The pregnancy was at the termination. This child had to be released, and she was, for 6 days, 7 days, morning and night, non-stop. And so every time I did mattress work, there was a kind of a clearing going down to the bottom almost of the cauldron. Every time I would bring up the old stew from the bottom of the cauldron, the old stuff back to pre-birth stuff, bring it up, and there it is floating on the top. And that's easier to access than digging down and trying to get through to it. But my rage facilitated the stirring of the cauldron. I could hear my ancestors raging in me. And I do believe that when I remember one particular episode at one of the trainings for Elizabeth's work, I was on the mattress, and I had remembered something from the convent when I was made to sing opera, and I didn't want to. I wanted to sing some of the pop music, of course I did. A wee girl from Donegal, God's sake. Didn't want opera, didn't want Italian, I could hardly speak English. And there I was on the mattress, and it must have been Elizabeth. I think it was Elizabeth, actually, was facilitating me. And I said, I don't want to sing your stupid song, Sister Jacinta. And Elizabeth said, what do you want to sing? I said, I will sing my own effing women's songs. I will never sing a hymn again to any hymn in the world. And I did it. I really went berserk. And when I'd finished the work, I was totally exhausted. Totally exhausted, but filled. Exhausted and filled with energy. Mm. And I remember Elizabeth saying to me, maybe not at that time, but a time later, now sing only your own songs. And I did that, and I've still done that all my years. That's it, my own. And my own songs were given to me as healing for myself. And the surprise and the joy for me is that other people thought they were healing and good for them too. Mm-hmm. See, everything I do is for myself. It was for me first. Everything I do, Phillida is there number one, because I realize unless I do that, I'm not being authentic. And as I keep telling you teachers, please do not teach from theories. We don't want a patriarchal model here. The female experiences life first, and out of that rich experience, whatever it is, there's a teaching. And she can, if she likes, make a theory out of it, but who wants theory? Just that experience. This I know. This I know. Because my body has experienced it. I have embodied it. And that's something we do a lot about. in the teachings of the Cauldron. We embody. This is the sacred temple, there is no other. This is the candle, there is no other. This is the chalice, there is no other. This is the cauldron, there is no other. So once we get a grip on that wonderful old Celtic philosophy, and extremely difficult to live, as you would know, it's not an easy option, Celtic consciousness, because the word is consciousness. And when we can truly live that and dance with the shadows, dance with them, and then the golden shadow, of course, that part we gave to who Mother Mary, Mother Teresa, whoever, these amazing people out there, the Pope, God help us, or that teacher, or Philida, great, beautiful people. And I said to somebody a couple of weeks ago, I will hold your golden shadow safely for you for 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, you need to live it yourself. And this, for me, that's been authentic. Yes, this person couldn't hold the golden shadow for herself. I was wonderful. I was great. I was doing all these things. Yes, that's true. Yes, I do. I do all those things. Yes, I do. And you're seeing all that in me. Either you want to have it and it's natural jealousy, or you do have it but you're afraid to express it yet. So I will hold it for 2 weeks. I don't give people much time. And after the 2 weeks, phone me. And I want to hear a gospel of all the wonderful things you've ever done in your life and the wonderful woman that you are. And if I don't hear that gospel coming from you, I'll give you another 2 weeks to work it out. But I would get tired holding a shadow for somebody, either the dark shadow or the golden shadow. Because in the end, what is the shadow? The shadow is the divinity I don't see. That's what the real shadow is. My divine self that I don't see, but I'll give to God, I'll give to Jesus, I'll give to Holy Mary, I'll give to Ramachubalabanaba or somebody else out there with a strange sounding name. And that's wonderful. And they get to be saints and wonderful, and I get to be ordinary. No, you don't. You didn't come to the earth to be ordinary. You came to experience an amazing life and to go through all the stuff of the Cauldron. I want to read you a poem from one of my poetry books, and I think it's gorgeous. I won't step over the rim of this abyss filled with the putrid stew of yesterday. I'll tighten fast the lid on these poisoned thoughts and never taste again sickening on my breath. I need some distraction, but nothing gives relief from the pain still screaming to be freed. Then courage pounding in like some white stallion intent on breaking me carries me there. Old memories tumble in as gentle witnessing pours holy oils on wounds now willing to be healed. And plunging deeper still, remembering serves release. Awakening from stillbirth, I come howling beatitudes. You see, that's the invitation to the Cauldron. And to look at the stew from yesterday. And I always remember my great granny up in Kilrain in Ireland, Donegal. And I'm pottering behind her as a wee one. And she was there with the big black cauldron, pardon me. And in it she had the Irish stew and the big leg of mutton and all the vegetables straight from the garden. These big beautiful potatoes. And she would stir, as she was stirring, she would there she was singing into the stew like we sing our gucha into the cauldron. There she was. And I could see the burnt bits from the bottom coming up to the top. And I thought, wasn't that great? Oh, Grandma was able to So that's what I started doing then with my life and teaching you beautiful people. Keep it stirring. There's always something coming up, looking for healing. And then in the end, when I stir my cauldron today, what comes up? Song, dance, joy, laughter, friendships. What? Black chocolate. You know, and when there is the arrogance, sure, it's only arrogance. Bless your heart, dear. Oh, God love you. You're 3 and you want to be 75, you know. So it's that way of being in love with life and death. It has to be inclusive. Living in love with life that includes death. And for me, that's a great joy. And I'm coughing my lungs out, you see. But you see, before it used to be pneumonia. Now it's a cold. You see? Mm-hmm. Before it would have taken my life, I couldn't do things because of it. Now it doesn't interfere. I just don't sit in drafts. Creolan, is there something else?
I think just such a beautiful way of describing this. There is no heaven, there is no hell, there is only one, and it's bringing it all together. I think we're
gone.
I think we're done.
We're done. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Phillida.